And good morning. Welcome to Bradford and Brooks. And I'm not Jim Brooks. I'm Milt Spaulding in here with you this morning, sitting in for Jim, who is out today. But I've got Margie Bradford with me.
This is a special edition.
It is a special edition, special Friday edition of Bradford and Brooks. And we will be doing this throughout the
yes, we'll have a
season.
couple of more to do.
And we've got a special guest in the studio with us right now. We've got Matt Leyman, who's a candidate for the House of Representatives, 4th District. And traditionally, in the past, Nelson County was not part of the 4th District at all, right?
It was totally 2nd District.
2nd District, but now about half of the county is in the 4th District, and now that kind of brings you into to the candidacy here. And I guess just to start us out a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Milt. Thanks, Margie, for having me on this morning. It's a real pleasure to be here in Bardstown. I know we're technically just across the line in the other district, but as you mentioned, roughly speaking, north and east of 245 is now part of the 4th District. Mm-hmm. I'm Matt Leyman. I grew up in northern Kentucky, in Kenton County, so real close to Cincinnati. Grew up there, grew up Catholic. I went through 12 years of Catholic school, went to Covington Catholic High School, and after that had the opportunity to attend college and as a Mitch McConnell Scholar at the University of Louisville. So spent 4 years there, and generally an excellent program that the senator helped put together to really try to keep people in the state and study at the University of Louisville, and had a lot of excellent opportunities from that program as well. I always thought I was going to go into politics or policy. It just has kind of always been in my heart to see what I can do to make the world a slightly better place. And so then I went to graduate school, moved to New York at the time, and studied urban planning. And so again, I thought I was going to be an urban planner or in urban policy or public policy. And when I moved to New York, I was just a kid from Kentucky and realized how expensive New York gets. So I took a part-time job, and I was working he was a psychiatry researcher developing medicines for psychiatric diseases, schizophrenia and bipolar, and actually a lot of psychiatric disorders. And I became very, very interested in that type of work, and so that's really what launched my career in drug development. And it used to be hard to explain to people what I did for a living, because the one thing about after this pandemic, everyone knows what a clinical trial is. Everyone knows how drugs are developed and the FDA's role in that. And
so that's what you do now.
And so I've done that more than 20 years. So doing running clinical trials around the world, developing medicines
for all different kinds of
all types of things. And I've moved around a lot. So that job took me from New York. Lived in Ukraine for about 5 years, running very large global clinical trials for multiple sclerosis, cancer, pain, neuropathic pain, all sorts of indications. Moved to Germany after that, again developing. At that time we were trying to develop a cancer vaccine with a company that took me to Germany, and actually then moved to California for a few years with that company as well. And then found my way back to Kentucky about 7 years ago. Had an opportunity to start a company based on some technology that was developed at the University of Louisville. And so that was a treatment for pancreatitis, chronic pancreatitis. And we set that up about 7 years ago in Louisville. And this treatment is it's a surgical treatment where you can cure chronic pancreatitis by removing, a surgeon will remove your pancreas, sends it to Louisville, Kentucky, and on an airplane, and we'll re-engineer the cells overnight usually and send them right back the next morning. And so the cells that make insulin to keep you from being diabetic, those will go back into your liver the next morning.
Well, we could do a whole program.
Oh, I know.
On this.
I love talking to people. I know. I don't want to get too off, but it's interesting. Look, these are the things not everybody knows about, and I think these are the things we should be really proud of in Kentucky. It's really cutting-edge technology that's been developed.
Being as diabetes is a huge health problem for Kentuckians.
Well, yeah, and across the country, too.
Yes. You're right. So that should be of interest to Kentuckians.
Yeah. And so, like I said, that product we developed was it's for pancreatitis now, but we continue. And so we were bought by a larger company about almost 2 years ago now, and so I did have the opportunity to take time off and do this now, run for Congress full time. But I'm very proud of the work that I've done in that field, and assume I'll get back to it at some point.
That sounds really interesting. Well, that leads right into why did you decide to run? What were the issues that motivated you, or conditions that motivated you to enter this race?
Sure. That's a good question, Margie. So as I said, I mean, I've been lucky enough. I do have the time to do this. I mean, and I know that sounds strange, but this is a big undertaking.
That's a big issue.
Yes, and I think it's a big issue for anyone who wants to challenge an incumbent. I mean, in any district, it's the amount of money it takes these days and the amount of time you spend to get out there and spread the word. It's a big undertaking. So I think the ability to be able to do, I do have the time to do this seriously, and that's important. But as I mentioned earlier, I mean, I've always been interested in public policy and trying to make the world a better place. I mean, that is why I'm running for office. And I would be remiss to not say I do not agree with our current congressman on nearly any issue. Thomas Massie is a self-described, I would say, pretty extreme libertarian. I don't see the world in the same way. I think there is always a possibility, with outside of government, within government, for people to kind of come together and work together and solve problems and negotiate and try to legislate. So I think that's a lot of what motivated me. Is I think this district in our state can be better served with somebody who wants to really lean in and engage in the legislative process.
Well, let's try to lean in on some of those issues. So, choose some of the ones that, obviously, health would probably be one of your major issues. Yes.
So health generally, and I think also very important is mental health and substance abuse issues. I mean, I'm sure like you and a lot of your listeners, I mean, I've been affected by the opioid epidemic. I mean,
it's had a huge impact in this county.
It's had a huge impact. I mean, we of course, Kentucky and parts around Ohio, the Appalachian area has been absolutely devastated. And it's it's a complex issue that I think my criticism of the way this has been handled at the federal level in particular is it's too often been tried to overly simplistic approaches. I mean, it is a medical problem first and foremost. It is a medical problem that was started by American drug companies, and we have to acknowledge that and have to hold them accountable. Drugs like fentanyl and oxycodone have been around for a long time. I mean, these have been on the market. I think oxycodone was 1930s or so. I mean, these are old drugs, so doctors knew how to handle them. They knew the risk of addiction, but they had legitimate use for pain relief for certain patients. And then in the 1990s, some of the new formulations were being developed and came out. And they were all American drug companies. I know Mylan and these Johnson & Johnson, Cephalon. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Mallinckrodt, all U.S. domestic companies found a way to make a ton of money by pushing these pills, and they did it by bribing doctors, hiding data, really unethical sales and marketing practices. The problem is that we have a large population of people who are addicted. And, so what happened in roughly 2015, the feds decided, okay, enough is enough, and they cracked down. The problem is this whole kind of law enforcement only approach, so they've cracked down, is you push people into the black market. And so what we've seen in the last few years is actually, and even though they've been cracking down on the pill mills and the doctors and the drug companies, illegal and unethical marketing practices, we have not treated these people for substance abuse disorders. And so they're finding it on the black market. And then, of course, we now have the black market being, that's being fulfilled by it's primarily Chinese manufacturers, and it's being smuggled in through our ports, a lot through Mexico as well, by various cartels. And so they're feeding, they're meeting the demand.
So this would be something that you would concentrate on if you were
Very
elected.
much so. I mean,
Yeah.
this would be a very high priority. Again, the moral obligation that we do something about this, and we try to help our neighbors and family and friends. If you want to think, put your tough guy hat on. I mean,
Right.
It's also a real economic issue. I mean, this is overwhelmingly hits the working age male population.
Right.
Not to say that women and older and younger people.
Right.
I mean, this is having, we're talking about labor shortages and inflation. I mean, part of dealing with the economy is making sure our able-bodied, working age people are able to work and work successfully, and they need help. And and this is important. It's very important to me.
Good. I noticed that you're also interested in veterans issues.
Yes. It's so I actually did a press conference over at the American Legion around the corner here
Right.
this morning, and this is maybe one step back. My campaign slogan and a lot of what I talk about is respect, responsibility, and democracy. I mean, that's really the thrust and the strategy of my campaign. And when I talk about things like respecting the people who sacrificed, and their families sacrificed, and for American ideals, things like equal
Right.
opportunity for all citizens, the institutions of justice, and that we've developed over hundreds of years, our representative form of government, and these are important values. I mean, those are the motivating factors of why most people went into the service.
Right.
And there's the nuts and bolts issues
Right.
with veterans of veterans affairs and better health care and dealing with homelessness, and those are very important. But I think it's also very important that the way you honor and recognize veterans is by standing up and working for the ideals that they sacrifice for. So that in practice that means supporting our democratic allies and friends around the world. So in Ukraine, and understanding, stopping Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. I mean, the man who controls the largest nuclear arsenal in the world and who has unjustly invaded his neighbor.
You spent those years
yes.
in Ukraine, so you have a special affinity
I
there.
have a special affinity. Not that I have any particularly better insight than, we have a great State Department, we have diplomats, we have military intelligence, all sorts of things that know a whole lot more than I do. But I know right and wrong. I know when I see something that's unjust. And this is a country that has been friends of the United States. They're a democratic country. I mean, every democracy has its own
Right.
challenges or whatever, but
Right.
these are our allies.
Right.
We work together. And it is not acceptable, again, largest nuclear arsenal in the world. I mean, Russia has more nuclear warheads than we do. We can't let somebody with that kind of arsenal expand his ambitions throughout Europe and the Middle East, and that is not an acceptable way that the world can run.
So you think there's more that the U.S. should be doing to try to help Ukraine?
So this is, and I think we're doing what is appropriate at this point. I do not engaging in a war directly with Russia. I don't think would benefit anybody. I don't think that would benefit the Ukrainians, even though I know sometimes the Ukrainian president will talk about things like that. I think that has a potential to escalate in unnecessary ways, but I do think I have been pleased. I've been frankly proud of the support of our country and other members of NATO and in the countries in the West, the type of support that we've provided. I hope, and part of what, again, another priority in Congress, that this is not going to, I do believe Ukraine will repel Russia and they will secure their own country. But they will need help. I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of refugees that have been displaced.
Yeah, this is a worldwide problem.
This is going to. So I hope we have the wherewithal to help see this through and help redevelop and repair that country. You look through history, the times we have done that, and the times we have stuck with things. Like in Germany and with the Marshall Plan. good things have happened, and we developed long-time good friendships with those countries and good trading partners with those countries. And, I think, again, beyond just our moral responsibility, there are important strategic reasons that, Ukraine is a huge agricultural producer.
Oh, yeah.
They're huge, fertilizer producers. So when we talk about important things for the world, not just Ukraine, they are a key part of that. And I think as we help to develop, help redevelop and repair Ukraine, that will benefit us and the rest of the world as well.
Oh, kind of getting back to the veterans issues, right now, inflation has caused the rise in rent. And the Army has not so far yet risen to the challenge of helping soldiers, servicemen, to be able to afford their rent.
Yeah.
Is this something that you would work on?
Yes. So that is an interesting and good question. And
Well, we so often honor our veterans when we give them honor, but we don't necessarily give our soldiers or even our veterans as much support as they should have for the sacrifices that they made.
And I know what you're saying. It's I think too often we honor them, on Veterans Day or Memorial Day, and wave a few flags, and everyone goes home and forgets about the problems. And I think, but yes, I truly believe, and I would work very hard. Veterans deserve everything they're entitled to, if not more. The sacrifices that they have made. I don't think a lot of people really understand it unless you've gone through it, and I don't necessarily appreciate it as much. But yeah, this is from housing to health care, to mental and physical health care.
Well,
the
suicide rate for veterans is very high, and soldiers.
Yes, and so homelessness is higher, suicide is higher, substance abuse is higher, have higher rates of unemployment. So it is, and that's what I've been talking about this morning, and we'll continue to talk about is, and it's a similar type of thing where it's we live in a large, wealthy country. We have the ability to do these things. It's just sometimes we don't. Certainly at the federal level, we get there's the politics and Twitter, and everyone's got to have a hot take on something, and then everyone loses interest the next day and moves on to the next thing. And there are fundamental issues in this country that we need to. We have to have the wherewithal. We need congressional representatives who will have the discipline and wherewithal to see this over years. It's not something you just fix with a tweet or or one bill. It needs. And I was talking about this morning. So it's not apartments or housing for veterans necessarily, but there is actually a lot of money that's available for job training and job retraining for veterans that hasn't been claimed. This was passed by Congress 2 years ago.
So is that a lack of the people not knowing about it, or what?
It's. I think there's several. You do need your congressional representatives. Part of your job is legislating. The other part of your job is to be a representative. So understanding the needs of your district, talking to the American Legions, talking to we have the Disabled American Veterans that's headquartered in the 4th District up in northern Kentucky in Erlanger. Understanding what the needs of those organizations and their members are and helping to facilitate that. That's another important part of this job.
Providing service.
Providing service, to your constituents. And so I think those are some of the things. Like I said, it's kind of coming back to what you're asking. Yes, there are resources. We have a lot of people, a lot of wealth in this country. We've even, like I said, have bills that have been passed to provide for it. But we need competent people in government to see this through as well.
Okay. Well, March, I think if that's a good point, let's take a break.
All right.
And we'll come back with more right after this here on Bradford Brooks.
That means access to some of the things that don't really get paid for properly, and the provider, it's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance does not really compensate mental health providers the same way they do other, non-mental illness or physical illness, and I think that's ridiculous. But again, I don't necessarily think there's more, mental health issues than there were in the past. It's the difference. I mean, I couldn't, when I was in school, if I were angry and depressed, I could not have gotten my hands on an AR-15. Now you can. And I think that's, again, the availability and accessibility
Right.
of this. So that's where I keep coming back to is it's not that, an AR-15 in the hands of somebody who is competent and qualified and trained, maybe insured, and that's handled appropriately and respectfully is one thing. In the hands of a 16-year-old, frankly, regardless of their mental health status, is really probably not appropriate.
Right.
I concur on that one.
Well,
Because at 16, I don't think you quite developed the capacities to, wrong or right, but your tempers, I guess, are still not fully, your ability to control them is not fully developed at that point. And, you get mad and there you go.
Well, Matt, talk about any other issues that I haven't asked you about
okay.
that are of particular interest to you, or that you think that you in your position would be able to do to try to promote.
Sure.
If you were in Congress.
A couple of the things I do talk a lot about are infrastructure,
Right.
and everybody loves infrastructure, right? I mean and so our district, the district, the northern part of Nelson
District,
County
yeah.
has joined. Actually has some of the fastest growing parts of the state of Kentucky.
In our district.
So we have places like Shelby County.
Yeah.
Nelson County is booming also.
Yeah.
Boone County up in northern Kentucky where the Cincinnati Airport is. Growing very quickly. Lots of jobs. A lot of people moving to this area from out of state
Right.
as well. And so we need the infrastructure in those areas to keep up with this. That's highways and bridges and airport. We're building more runways up in northern Kentucky for the planes that are coming in. And to do that successfully, we have, and it was nice to see again in recent years, we passed bills at the congressional level to put that money to work. I think people always forget, it's not that Joe Biden just doesn't send a check to everybody. Your congressional representatives need to help local governments, local agencies to apply for that money, to put that money to use. So, working on that, making sure we get our fair share is very important. Our district also has a lot of rural areas. It's a very, I actually really like the 4th District. You're one of the few counties here in Nelson County that does not touch the Ohio River. So it's kind of, the one thing that binds most of the 4th District together is the river and the legacy of tobacco farming. And I also think that's something I feel like everyone just, well, it depends where you go. Some people have forgotten, some people haven't. The economic and cultural importance of the federal price support system for tobacco that ended in 2004.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of areas.
Oh, there were a lot of farm families that depended on that money.
Yes, and they depended on that money, and they depended on that money to also do other things, invest in, or, some people may even say gamble in foal production or thoroughbreds, or, it really was, so we have a lot of areas, big tobacco areas still, and that are in this district. Harrison County, Mason County, Oldham County, Carroll County. It's Henry County. So these areas. This was really, and there's still. This is it's been 16, 17 years, and they're still trying to recover. They're still trying to find the right cash crops. So we have the two that have sort of come to the fore have been cattle. Kentucky's now the largest cattle producer east of the Mississippi. So initiatives to continue that growth and that support, I would like to work very hard on. The other one is actually hemp. And so this is an interesting, that was legalized. So industrial hemp was legalized in places like Kentucky about 7 or 8 years ago. And, there's a lot of excitement and fanfare. But it collapsed very shortly after that. And there was a whole lot of people that wanted to get involved, but the market hadn't developed. And it was not part of the Farm Bill. So there were no market supports for this. There was no export assistance. There was nobody, what had existed with the tobacco program. There was a whole federal program to help support this.
Right.
So I do think there are a lot of opportunities in hemp and cannabis. So, more than half the country now, cannabis is legal.
So this would be something you would support.
Yeah, I mean, but it not just. I think again, we need to have the wherewithal to see this through. Not just it's not just one pill. I mean, it's and agricultural products don't just get themselves to market magically. I mean, every product, and we have excellent land. We still have a lot of know-how and these types of hemp and cannabis. We have the barns and the weather for it. So I would be interested in, again, helping to advance that industry and help support, and I think it would be a real benefit for some of our rural areas and farms as well. So that's...
Well, that would give them another cash crop.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and hemp is, like I said, I know there was
So what are the uses of hemp besides making ropes?
Oh, I mean, yeah, they do all sorts. I mean, you can bring in the hemp round table; they'll tell you all about it. And it really is amazing. It is a good product, and I think people have talked about it.
Well,
and I think
it's
Senator McConnell talked about it.
been used for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, longer than that.
Longer than that, but
and
yeah.
It has a remarkable number of industrial uses, but again, it needs a rational system, a farm support system that, I mean, I think I can't remember exactly the year. A few years ago, it was, $40 a pound. Now it's like $1 a pound. I mean, you can't plan to farm with the prices going all over the place like they do in the hemp market right now.
Right.
So, a lot of...
So you need a price control.
You probably need supports. You need, and again, I think export assistance would be very helpful. So the ability, having our trade representatives in China and Asia and Europe, and representing American products and negotiating those, supporting. Also the whole supply chain. We can grow a lot of hemp, but we don't have any. There's been real restrictions and processing equipment and logistics to get things from one place to another. So that there are a lot of issues that really do need some attention for that whole industry to really flourish.
Do you think some of the inability to do that has to do with the fact that we've had all these laws against growing marijuana?
Sure, without a doubt. I mean,
that's kind of held up things.
Oh, absolutely, and I mean that's also why the fact that hemp was illegal for so long is also. I mean that's very different than cannabis, but it was, that got caught in that. So yes, I do think that's. There's still that legacy of, and listen, I'm not here to. I want to make I think just because, again, maybe my background in healthcare, I'm not a big proponent of medical marijuana unless there's, better data, better controlled clinical trials. I think of cannabis as it should be legalized because it's, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the health benefits of it. I think that goes too far. But I think it is something that can be grown and regulated. And I think it has to be. I really believe this needs to get descheduled and legalized at the federal level. And one other point along with this, and I think this is real life for me. I have a son in high school and a daughter in high school, and I'm watching, the marijuana that's out there in high school and college kids. I mean, it's tainted with opioids, with fentanyl. I don't know if you've heard these stories. I mean, these are real stories.
No, I hadn't heard that.
So I think legalizing and regulating cannabis, something like with tobacco or alcohol, would be. It actually is very important. We need to know where these things are manufactured, what farms are coming from, and those are the types of things you have with tobacco. And again, tobacco is not good for you either, but it's.
But it is legal.
It is legal, and it's regulated, and
yes.
you know what's in it, and the buyer knows what's in it.
Right.
And I think that's where I think it's really scary out there right now with people just I'm going to talk to the coroner actually in Mason County about this, and I think he said, I forget the exact number, he said there were like 17 people just last quarter that had died in Mason County from overdoses, accidental.
Yeah.
So one gentleman, I think he said he was in his 30s, had bought some marijuana, was smoking in his apartment, and dropped dead. It was tainted with fentanyl. So they're finding this, people who think they're not really doing anything all that serious are dying from this.
I think it's been kind of the same thing with heroin as
Yeah.
well. Little
Well, the
traces of
fentanyl. I mean, they are making fentanyl look like regular drug, like I'm Xanax.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was a young man in Louisville who took a Xanax. What he thought was a Xanax turned out to be fentanyl. Killed him.
Speaking of the crops for Kentucky, of course, tobacco was a long time cash crop for the state, not so much now. Of course, we got the bourbon industry that's continuing to boom and bring a lot of economic benefits to the country, or the state rather. And of course, now in nearby Hardin County, which is another district, but all of the plants that are coming in to work to support the electric vehicle industry.
Yes.
And with that, kind of, I'm taking the long trip around it. But here, especially here in Kentucky, over the last just few months, we've seen complete drastic weather systems come through, and with devastating effects. December, the rare December tornado that came through and just leveled parts of western Kentucky, and now just weeks ago, historic floods in eastern Kentucky. What can we do? Because I know some people are just, they believe climate change, and some people go, fake news. What can we do, or are we doing enough to try to maybe offset some of this?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Huge question.
that again, I mean, so many of these things are so complex. It's and I that's why I appreciate shows like this where you can have a civil discourse. I bet it's not just slogans and so I'll start from this. I'm maybe my time in the medical world and understanding biology. Like I'm always a little hesitant to make grand statements about things like our climate. I mean, these are exceptionally complex systems, and I'm always a little skeptical that any scientist or group of scientists know with any certainty what's happening with our climate. So with that skepticism in mind, I think it's also pretty clear. I mean, too much carbon in the atmosphere certainly is not helpful. And how unhelpful or how dangerous, again, I don't know to what debate. I do think there are ways to deal with carbon and reduce carbon emissions that in ways that also don't destroy our economy. I think, and to me, I think one of the most obvious is some sort of price on carbon. So carbon emitter, whether a factory or airlines or whatever, that there is a price for carbon. I'd also actually, I would personally have, I'd have obviously, I'm one of 435 people in Congress, but I do know there have been several initiatives to price carbon, but then also pay that back as a dividend to people, because I think that the concern that would be a little bit distortionary if it just becomes a price on carbon and then it goes into a bloated federal government. I think if people see that come back to that, so it's actually because the price of carbon it is an effect. It's affecting people's health, it's affecting your life, and I think if there is going to be a price on carbon, it can go. And I've seen plans that go back quarterly. You actually get a dividend, and then you'll see there's a price that. At some point, if the price is too high for this technology or that energy production source, there's an economic incentive for energy producers to move away from that. And so, I mean, that's generally the type of approach I would take to these.
Kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier, infrastructure. I think as we move forward with electric vehicles, of course, the infrastructure is going to have to be there to match it as well. Because if we're going to take all these gas vehicles off the roadway and replace them with electric, we need to be able to plug those vehicles in, and the infrastructure's got to handle that.
And we need the power generation capabilities. And I think I do know Thomas Massie always loved to joke about how his Tesla is powered by coal, Kentucky coal, which is frankly true. So we can build all these electric cars, but if all we're doing is burning coal to produce the electricity to power them, I don't know where we're getting.
I didn't think about that. That's very true.
Yeah. So you should look. It is. I will say it is kind of a funny. So he drives a Tesla, and he's got a Friends of Kentucky Coal license plate on it, and so.
All right.
So And then again, we're going to have some realistic discussions in this country, though, about, again, energy production. I think batteries are great. I think electric vehicles are great, but we're going to have to talk about nuclear power again in a way that we haven't talked about in this country. Wind and solar and renewables are, by any measure that I've seen, are very far away from being able to replace, coal and natural gas, and so we just have to be realistic about this. There's always a lot of ups and downs. I know there's a lot of anxiety. There have been issues with nuclear power in the past, but I think that is going to have to be a serious solution for the next generation.
We're going to take a final break of the morning. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back to Bradford and Brooks, a special edition here on this Friday morning. And we've got Matt Leyman in the studio with us today. He's running for the House of Representatives, 4th District, U.S. Congress. And Matt, we've talked a lot about issues and your background and so forth, but tell us a little bit about you. Let's get to know Matt personally.
Okay, so what do you need? I'm tall. No.
So you're married?
Yeah, so married. Been married 20 years, so we just celebrated our 20th anniversary earlier this year. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. So the 2 oldest are senior freshmen in high school, and then 1 in grade school, in 5th grade. All of us, my daughter's big into dancing, and my 2 sons, one's into football, one's into rugby, which is, that was new for me, because he's been doing it a couple of years. I still don't know any of the rules, so I'm not always sure what's going on, but it's fun to watch.
Well, you can get out there and yell anyway.
Just wait for the people on your team to start yelling.
When they cheer, then I know to cheer. But listen, I love, and my wife. So it's funny. This is a little story. So I actually met my wife in Austria she grew up in Florida. She was born to Colombian immigrants, and so she's first-generation American. But it was a really great opportunity. And, again, I think sometimes Kentucky, we forget what we have. It was called the Kentucky Institute for International Studies. If I remember correctly, and I understand correctly, it's the Kentucky Lottery actually funds a lot of that program, and it was a way that we were able to study abroad. So I spent 5 weeks in Austria, and that's where I met my wife, through the Kentucky Institute for International Studies. And so I'm very thankful for that program. But we like to travel. Like I said, we moved around all over the world at this point, and so we really enjoy that. Very much enjoy.
But you're native Kentuckian.
I'm a native, yeah. I was born in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, at St. Luke Hospital. My family, we were talking about Hardin County on the break there. So my ancestors are going back several generations. They were from Hardin County. They were actually, that family, they were Revolutionary War veterans. They were given land grants in Hardin County from Virginia. And when Fort Knox was put in, so their land was bought. There's a little town there, I think it's still on the map, called Stithton. I think it's in Fort Knox somewhere, and every so often you see it on the map, but that's where my family came from. And then, after their land was gone, they moved up closer to Cincinnati. So I've been in Covington, Northern Kentucky area for many, many generations at this point.
And on the break, we were talking about education, and you started out Catholic.
Yeah, so I went, yes, and it's kind of funny. We were looking at, there's only 3 majority Catholic counties in the state of Kentucky out of 120. So, and all 3 of them are now or part of Nelson County, of course, is one of those. So part of Nelson County is in the 4th District, and then Kenton and Campbell County in northern Kentucky. So that's like Covington and Newport, those towns up there. And so I went through 12 years of Catholic school, went to Covington Catholic High School, and my children are at Catholic school as well. And, it's important. It's important to us and our family. And again, I think there's always people talk about, you don't support public schools. I support public schools very much. My wife was a product of public schools. So, and I think it's very important that we have,
good educational systems all around. So,
Choices.
choices, and again, I'm always cautious when I say, because there's a lot of buzzwords going around. That's school choices can be listen, I think having schools that are appropriate for different types of people, we can go broadly. I mean,
Right.
trade schools and art schools, and having schools that are appropriate for everybody is important. And again, I'm also cautious. Just to be clear, I'm not a fan of using public money to fund religious or sectarian schools. I think that's an important distinction. But I'm very, very happy to be educated as a Catholic. So.
Excellent. So, final thoughts?
Well, like I said, if nothing else, I got so excited that the world's largest, we were talking about the
Yeah.
Heaven Hill Distillery, so the world's largest distillery is now in the 4th District, and I hope that I'll get down here to early and often through the campaign, and then as well in office. So it's a great place to be.
Yes.
Of course, Matt, thanks for coming in today. And remember, Matt Leyman, 4th District candidate when you go to the polls come November.
That's right.
All right.
And,
Thanks for coming in today. Margie, as always, it's been a pleasure being in here with you today.
Thank you.
We'll do it again soon.
All right.
All right. All right. Stay with us. We got news coming up here from the NBC radio networks, followed by your local news right here on WBRT.